A young girl lives a nightmare inside her own home, enduring constant abuse from her stepmother while her father, an exhausted police officer, fails to notice what's happening. Everything changes when Duke, a retired canine dog, steps in and takes action in a surprising way. An emotional story of pain, silence, and courage that will touch your heart from beginning to end. Watch until the final scene and discover how a dog managed to save a life when no one else saw what was really going on. The neighborhood of Maple Hollow in rural Tennessee was calm that afternoon. The sky was overcast, the wind carried leaves across the sidewalks, and birds chirped softly in the trees. But inside, one of the houses, there was no peace. "You're going to pay for this." Karen's voice echoed through the kitchen like a muffled thunderclap. In one hand, she tightly wrapped a belt in anger. The other trembled with impatience. Emily, crouched next to the cupboard, could barely breathe. Her wide eyes searched for an escape where none existed. The first strike came fast, snapping across her thin back. She recoiled, but did not scream. She had already learned that silence was her only defense. "See what you make me do?" Karen growled, raising her arm again. Another strike. And another. Emily trembled. The tears were already falling, but she refused to make a sound. Every breath was measured, every move calculated. She knew that one mistake could make everything worse. Karen stepped back, walked to the counter, and grabbed a glass of orange juice. She stared at the yellow liquid for a few seconds and then, without warning, threw it violently against the floor. The glass shattered instantly. Shards flew in all directions. "See what you've done? And you still wonder why you get hit? Clean it up. And if you cut yourself, that's your problem." Emily crawled toward the shards. She grabbed an old rag and began cleaning with her bare hands. One piece of glass pierced her finger. A thin but deep cut. Blood flowed quickly. She bit her lip, tasting the metallic mix of tears and despair. Karen gave a crooked smile. Pathetic. Outside in the backyard, Duke, the retired canine from the Nashville Police Department, stood up from where he had been lying. He limped on his back leg, a lasting injury from a shootout years ago. His ears stood alert. His nose pressed against the door. He heard everything. The scream, the silence, the impact, the shattering glass, the muffled crying. He knew that pattern all too well. Duke scratched the door with his front paw, once, twice, 3 times. Then he let out a low growl, quiet, restrained, almost as if he were speaking, but no one inside the house cared. Karen walked out of the kitchen as if nothing had happened. She lit a cigarette in the hallway and exhaled slowly, savoring the feeling of control that clung to her like a second skin. Hours later, the front door lock turned with a metallic click. Officer Ryan Miller, exhausted, stepped inside, his uniform still dusty from the road, his expression faded and hollow. Karen turned to greet him with a rehearsed smile. "Hey, love, you got home early today." Emily, her hand wrapped in a makeshift bandage, appeared quietly in the kitchen doorway. A long-sleeved shirt hid the bruises that marked her small frame. Ryan noticed the bandage on her finger. "What happened here?" "She hurt herself at school," Karen answered quickly before the girl could speak a word. "But I've already taken care of it." Ryan nodded, yawning. He dropped his bag on the couch, walked to the bedroom, and collapsed onto the bed without another word. Outside, beneath the pale moonlight, Duke kept his eyes locked on the back door. He knew it wasn't time yet, but it was coming. The next morning dawned under a gray, heavy sky. Inside the house, the air felt even heavier. Emily woke up aching, every muscle in her body protesting the violence of the night before. Her bandaged hand throbbed, but still, she rose quietly, careful not to make a sound. In the kitchen, Karen sipped coffee at the table like the queen of a picture-perfect home. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the house, oddly contrasting with the coldness of the tile floor. Beneath Emily's bare feet, she stepped toward the table to grab a slice of bread, but Karen slapped her hand away. "Go clean the house. And stay out of my sight," she said, pushing the plate aside with deliberate contempt. Without a word, Emily picked up the bucket and started cleaning the living room floor. She knew better than to disturb her stepmother's false sense of peace. "I want this house sparkling. No excuses. And no whining," Karen snapped, her tone sharp and threatening. Outside, Duke was lying beside the backyard gate. The old dog lifted his head when he heard the sound of the bucket scraping across the floor. He knew those sounds, he knew the rhythm, and he felt the tension in the air like a storm about to break. Hours passed. Late afternoon came. The lock turned once more. Ryan stepped inside. He looked more drained than ever. Eyes darkened from back-to-back shifts, shoulders hunched under a guilt he didn't yet understand. He dropped his bag to the floor, kicked. Off his boots, Karen greeted him with a light kiss on the cheek. "How was work?" "Rough, but I managed to get off early." "Where's Emily?" "She's in the kitchen, organizing a few things. I had her help a bit." Ryan walked to where his daughter stood, folding some towels with slow, deliberate movements. He knelt beside her and gently touched her arm, and she flinched, instinctively recoiling from his tuck. He noticed. He also saw a dark bruise just above the collar of her shirt. "Sweetheart, those bruises. What happened to you?" Emily froze for a second. Her heart raced. Her throat tightened, but the lie came quickly and weak and timid. "It was at school. A boy pushed me. Some kids keep making fun of me, calling me weird." Ryan frowned, his eyes narrowing with concern. "And no one said anything? The teacher? The principal?" Before Emily could respond, Karen stepped in behind them. "Babe, I'm sorry. I should have told you. I found out about it yesterday and decided to speak to the school myself. I didn't want to worry you, with everything you already deal with at work." She paused, her voice slightly shaken, carefully rehearsed. "I felt awful about it, but I thought it was better to handle it alone. You already carry so much." Ryan looked at them both, then sighed deeply. He ran a hand through his hair, weary. "If it happens again, tell me, okay, sweetheart?" Emily nodded silently, her lips pressed together. Out in the backyard, Duke watched everything from the narrow gap in the curtain, his nose pressed against the glass, eyes steady, then a single bark, low, measured, warning. Ryan turned toward the dog. "I'll talk to you tomorrow, buddy. Promise." Night fell hard and cold. The clock read 3:17 a.m. when Emily gave up trying to sleep. The mattress felt harder than ever. The bedsheet clung to her sweaty skin. Her chest was tight, the air refusing to come in properly. The house slept, but her pain did not. Barefoot, the girl tiptoed to the back door and carefully unlocked the latch. The sound of the cold wind pushing through the frame felt like freedom. Outside, the sky was dark and the world quieter than it had been all day. In the yard, Duke lifted his head the moment he saw her. He limped toward her, his body tired, but his eyes alert. Emily ran to him and threw her arms around his neck. She buried, her face in the thick fur, finally feeling the warmth she hadn't found in anyone else. "You're the only one who stays with me when I'm scared," she whispered, voice trembling. Duke looked at her as if he understood every word. He lay down, beside her, guarding her with his body, just like he used to. In better times, in safer places. Emily sat on the cold ground and stayed there, breathing slowly, finally unburdened by pretense. A few minutes later, the door creaked open again. Ryan stepped into the yard, a blanket thrown over his shoulders, his eyes still swollen from sleep. He saw his daughter sitting on the ground, clinging to Duke, and he smiled. A tired, broken smile, but real. "It's cold out here, sweetheart. What are you doing outside?" Emily shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Couldn't sleep." Ryan sat down beside her and ran his hand gently over Duke's fur. The dog wagged his tail slowly, comforted by the touch. For a while they just sat there in silence, listening to the wind rustling the leaves and the distant murmur of a town still asleep. "About that thing, the bruises. This so-called bullying, he began, his voice low, almost a whisper. You know you can talk to me, right? You don't have to be scared. I know it's hard sometimes, but hiding it just makes everything heavier. Emily looked at him, eyes glossy with tears, her throat burned with the weight of unspoken truth. She pictured herself telling him everything, the belt, the slaps, the broken glass. But when she opened her mouth, no sound came out. I'm fine, Dad, she murmured. It's just some kids messing around, but I'm handling it. Ryan wrapped his arm around her and kissed her forehead. I'm trying, kiddo. Me and Karen, we're trying to give you a decent life, even without your mom. I know it's not easy. Emily just leaned her head on his shoulder. She wanted to believe things would get better, wanted to believe it was all temporary. But deep down, something told her the worst was yet to come. After a while, Ryan stood up. Go on. Get some sleep. You've got school tomorrow. Emily nodded. Before walking inside, she cast one last glance toward the kitchen window. Karen was standing there, in the dark, completely still, watching everything. Her eyes didn't blink. Her face was a cold, unreadable mask. She hadn't said a word. But Emily knew. Karen had seen it all, and she did not like being watched. Hours later, the sun rose pale over Maple Hollow. Ryan had already left for work. He left behind a hastily scribbled note on the table and a gentle kiss on his daughter's forehead while she still slept. The house was quiet, too quiet. The sound of high heels clicking down the hallway sliced through the silence like a blade. Emily, still holding a damp cloth, froze where she stood. She knew this wasn't just a walk down the hall, it was a sentence. Karen appeared from the shadows, her eyes burning, her face hard as stone. Without saying a word, she grabbed Emily by the hair and yanked her backward. Emily let out a muffled cry of pain. What did you tell him, huh? Karen spat, her teeth clenched in fury. Having a nice little chat with your daddy in the middle of the night. Thought I wouldn't notice. Emily tried to pull away, but Karen was stronger. She shoved the girl against the wall and gripped her shoulders tightly. You told him something? Answer me. No, I swear. I didn't say anything. Emily sobbed, her body trembling. Don't lie to me, you little brat. You think you're clever. You think you're going to turn him against me? Without waiting. For a response, Karen stormed down the hallway, yanked open a cabinet, and pulled out a belt. Thick, worn leather, marked by time and use. You like telling stories so much. I'll give you a real reason to cry today. Emily backed away, but there was nowhere to run. Karen approached, wide-eyed, unhinged. She struck once, twice. The pain exploded in her legs, sharp and searing, like fire tearing through skin. Cry, go ahead. Cry now, you little fake. After a few more blows, Karen paused. Breath ragged, face flushed, eyes shining with hatred. You know what? Today I'm gonna do it right. I'll put jeans on you and beat you so bad you won't walk for days. She turned back toward the closet, flinging open drawers with violent urgency, but at that moment, something shifted. The back door, left ajar, creaked open slowly. Duke entered, limping, silent. Eyes locked, tail still, chest heaving. Karen didn't notice him right away. She was too busy choosing the right clothes to beat a child. But when she turned back, she came face to face with him. Duke was growling, low, steady, lethal. Get out of here, you filthy mutt, she shouted, raising the belt high. And then, he leapt. The impact hit Karen squarely on the arm. The same arm that still held the belt high in the air, like a sentence about to be carried out. Duke's teeth sank deep into the flesh, tearing through skin, muscle, and every illusion of control she had left. Karen screamed. A high, twisted sound filled not only with pain, but with the terror of someone who, for the first time, realized they were no longer in control. She tried to shake free, but Duke held on with relentless force, twisting, using the weight of his trained body to knock her off balance. She stumbled and crashed to the floor, the belt slipping from her hand. Her legs kicked violently. Her fingernails scratched the hardwood floor in desperation, her face contorted, her hair wild, her eyes crazed. But Duke didn't let up. He adjusted like a seasoned predator, climbed over her side and hovered inches from her throat. He didn't bite. He didn't need to. He just held her down, pressing his body against hers, growling low, eyes locked like a living sentence of judgment. Emily, pressed against the wall, was trembling all over. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. She couldn't move, could barely breathe. She didn't know if this was a miracle or a nightmare turned inside out. The belt had flown across the room. Blood from the bite spread across the floor like paint spilled in fury. And Karen's face, the same face that once wore the smug mask of control, was now drenched in panic, sweat, and helplessness. Duke only stepped back when he knew she was no longer a threat, when her body stopped struggling, when the silence of defeat screamed louder than any authority she ever pretended to have. Then he turned and walked slowly back to Emily, limping, breathing hard. But his eyes were still focused, his chest rising with the weight of a duty fulfilled. With trembling hands, tears on her cheeks, and fear clinging to every inch of her skin, Emily ran to the kitchen. She grabbed the phone as if it were a lifeline, dialed with shaking fingers, trying not to scream, trying not to wake a deeper, darker nightmare. Dad, her voice broke, shattered, choked on tears. Dad, come home, please, now. Something terrible happened. Please, just come. Please. There was silence on the other end, but not just any silence. It was the kind of silence that lasts only 2 seconds and changes everything. Stay where you are, Ryan answered, his voice firmer than any command he'd ever given as a cop. I'm on my way. She hung up, and for a brief moment, the house fell into a silence deeper than death. Karen lay on the floor, her arm bloodied, motionless. The belt, now just a symbol of defeated violence, lay discarded nearby, and Duke stood between Emily and the danger, unmoving, a wall of fur and will, a soldier who refused to sleep. Then the front door burst open. Ryan entered like he was storming a hostile room. His hand was already on his gun. His eyes, trained, sharp, unflinching, scanned the room with precision. But when he saw, truly, firsthand what was in front of him, time stopped. The gun nearly slipped from his grip, the woman he thought he knew, sprawled on the floor, bleeding. His daughter, crumpled against the wall, her face soaked in tears. The dog, stained in red, panting like a soldier back from battle. What the hell is this? Emily slowly lifted her face. Her eyes were so swollen, they looked like rivers ready to burst through a dam. But she spoke, softly, broken, with the voice of trauma. She was going to hit me again, Dad. She grabbed my hair. She threw me down. She picked up the belt. She said she was going to beat me until I couldn't walk. Ryan didn't move. His head shook, slowly, as if trying to erase the reality being written in front of him. No. Karen wouldn't. She wouldn't do that. She took care of you. His voice died before it could finish. You must have misunderstood it. It had to be an accident. It wasn't an accident, Dad. Emily's voice cracked through the room like lightning, louder and sharper than any scream. She hits me every day. She hurts me when you're not here. I told you it was bullying because I was scared. She always lied to you. Always. And then Ryan started to see. To truly see. Every scene he'd missed, every sign he'd ignored. The belt covered in blood. The poorly bandaged hand. The bruises that never matched the stories. The long sleeves in summer. The fear buried in her eyes. The truth detonated in front of him like an emotional grenade. He let the gun fall to the floor. He walked over to Karen, knelt beside her, touched her neck. No pulse. No life. And the weight of guilt collapsed on him like a building crumbling from the inside. And he was standing right in the center of the wreckage. The Xiao, Ambulance arrived minutes later. The forensic team. Neighbors. Muffled sirens. Emily was cared for by paramedics. Duke examined by a vet who could barely believe what he was hearing. The judge's ruling came quickly. Self-defense. Duke would not be punished. He wasn't guilty. He was the only one in that house who acted when no one else saw. The next day, Ryan handed in his badge. Not out of duty, but because he understood that he had failed. Too deeply. Too silently. And uniforms don't cover the kind of silence that kills from the inside out. Weeks later, the house stood empty. The old blue pickup truck carried only a few boxes, and many ghosts. Duke sat in the back seat, his head resting against the window. Emily beside him, staring out at the world with the eyes of someone who had survived an earthquake. Ryan drove in silence. "Where are we going?" she asked, not looking away from the road. Ryan looked forward, toward the unknown, to somewhere no one will ever hurt you again. The truck pulled away, dust rose behind them, and neither of them looked back in the rearview mirror. How many Emilys are still out there? How many children are suffering behind the walls we call homes? This story is hard, but it's far too real to ignore. If Duke hadn't been there, what would have happened to her? Sometimes, the one who saves a life doesn't wear a badge, doesn't speak, but carries courage in every breath. If this story touched you, share it. Not for me, but for every child still suffering in silence. Leave a comment. I saw Emily, to show you didn't look away, and if you know someone who seems too strong to ever ask for help, stay close. Because sometimes the loudest cries for help are the quietest ones. Subscribe, because here, we tell the stories the world pretends not to see.